The wallet that changed everything. Have you ever wondered if one small act of honesty could completely transform your entire life? What I'm about to share with you is a story so powerful, so deeply moving, that it will make you believe in second chances, in the power of human kindness, and in the destiny that sometimes brings two broken souls together to heal each other in ways neither of them could have ever imagined. 12-year-old Ethan wandered the streets of downtown Philadelphia barefoot, his small frame barely visible among the crowds rushing past him on the busy sidewalks. Hunger was his constant companion, an ache that never truly left his hollow stomach. And as he walked those unforgiving streets day after day, memories of his Uncle Richard flooded his mind like waves crashing against a shore. Uncle Richard had been the only person who had ever shown him genuine love, the only one who had made him feel like he mattered in this vast, indifferent world. But after his uncle's sudden death from a heart attack 2 years ago, Ethan's life had spiraled into a nightmare of survival on the streets. He rummaged through trash cans, looking for scraps of food, relied on the rare generosity of strangers who barely glanced his way, and slept wherever he could find shelter from the cold Philadelphia nights. On that particular autumn afternoon, as golden leaves swirled through the air and the scent of roasting chestnuts filled the streets, something happened that would change everything. As Ethan shuffled along Market Street, his eyes caught sight of a man dressed in an expensive black suit, carrying a leather briefcase, walking with the hurried pace of someone important, someone with places to be and people depending on him. The man was clearly preoccupied, probably thinking about an upcoming meeting or some urgent business matter. And as he rushed across the street, weaving between cars, a thick leather wallet slipped from his coat pocket and landed on the pavement with a soft thud. Ethan's eyes locked onto it immediately, and his heart began to race as he quickly bent down and picked it up, his fingers trembling as he felt the weight of it in his hands. When he opened the wallet, his breath caught in his throat because inside were stacks of crisp bills, several credit cards with gold embossing, and what looked like at least $1,000 in cash. For a boy who hadn't eaten a proper meal in days, who had been wearing the same torn clothes for months, who had forgotten what it felt like to sleep in a real bed, this money represented everything he desperately needed and more. His mind raced with possibilities. He could buy food, maybe even rent a cheap room for a few nights, perhaps get some new clothes that didn't have holes in them, and for just a moment, he considered slipping the wallet into his pocket and disappearing into the crowd before anyone noticed. But then a voice echoed in his head, clear as day, his Uncle Richard's voice, saying the words he had repeated so many times. Son, honesty is the only real wealth we have in this world, and no matter how little we possess, we must never compromise on that. And in that moment, standing there on that busy Philadelphia street with a fortune in his hands, Ethan made a choice that would alter the course of his entire life. "Hey kid, what do you think you're doing?" A deep voice called out from behind him, startling him so much he nearly dropped the wallet. Ethan spun around and found himself face to face with the man in the black suit, who had noticed his wallet was missing and had come back searching for it. The man, whose name was Michael Hayes, stood there breathing heavily from running, his eyes fixed on the wallet in Ethan's hands, studying the boy with an intensity that made Ethan's heart pound even harder. This is yours, sir," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper, as he extended the wallet toward Michael with shaking hands, his eyes downcast because he couldn't bear to see the suspicion he imagined must be in the man's face. Michael took the wallet slowly, his expression unreadable, and for several long seconds, he said nothing at all, just stood there examining this raggedy boy who had just handed him back what could have been a life-changing amount of money. "You could have run," Michael finally said, his voice softer now, tinged with something that sounded almost like wonder. "You could have taken this and disappeared into the city, and I never would have found you. Why didn't you?" Ethan looked up then, his eyes meeting Michael's, and in a quiet voice that carried the weight of grief and memory, he replied, "My uncle always told me that honesty is our greatest treasure, even when we have nothing else left in the world. And I couldn't disappoint him, even though he's gone." Something shifted in Michael's expression at those words, a softening around his eyes, a subtle change in the way he looked at this young boy standing before him. He studied Ethan more carefully now, taking in the torn clothes, the dirty face, the bare feet covered in cuts and bruises. and the unmistakable signs of someone who had been living on the streets for far too long. "Come with me," Michael said suddenly, making a decision that seemed to surprise even himself. "Let's walk and talk, and get you something to eat. You look like you could use a good meal." Ethan hesitated for just a moment, years of street survival instincts warning him to be cautious. But something in Michael's eyes told him this man meant no harm, and so he followed. Michael led Ethan to a small diner called Rosie's, a cozy place with red vinyl booths and the comforting smell of coffee and bacon filling the air. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan sat down at a real table and ordered real food from a menu. As he devoured a burger, fries, and a chocolate milkshake, Michael watched him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. And when Ethan finally slowed down, Michael gently asked, "Tell me your story, son. Why are you out here alone? Where's your family?" And so Ethan began to talk, the words spilling out of him like water from a broken dam, telling the stranger about his mother, Sophia, who had abandoned him when he was just 7 years old, leaving him with Uncle Richard in exchange for money because she had gambling debts she couldn't pay. He spoke about the golden days with Uncle Richard, who had been a construction worker with a big heart and an even bigger laugh, who had taught him how to throw a baseball, how to be honest, how to be a good person despite the cruelty of the world. He described how safe he had felt in his uncle's small apartment in South Philly, how loved he had been, and how completely shattered his world became when Uncle Richard died suddenly, leaving Ethan with nowhere to go and no one who cared whether he lived or died. His voice cracked as he explained how he had ended up on the streets, how the system had failed to place him anywhere, how he had learned to survive by his wits and the occasional kindness of strangers. Michael listened to every word with deep attention, his trained mind as a physician processing not just the story, but the trauma behind it, the resilience this young boy had somehow maintained despite everything life had thrown at him. "You have something special in you, Ethan," Michael said when the boy finished talking, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "You have courage and you have integrity, and those are rare qualities these days, especially in someone so young who has been through so much. I don't believe our meeting today was just a coincidence. I think maybe there's a reason our paths crossed exactly when they did." Ethan looked at Michael with questions in his eyes, not quite understanding what this man meant, but sensing that something important was happening, that this encounter was different from any other interaction he'd had since Uncle Richard died. Michael glanced at his watch and smiled gently. "Come on," he said, standing up and leaving money on the table. "Let's get out of here. There's somewhere I want to take you, something I want to show you." And so Ethan followed the stranger out into the Philadelphia afternoon, his mind swirling with questions, and his heart daring to hope for something he couldn't quite name. Michael drove them to his home in the suburbs of Chester County, a beautiful 2-story house with a well-maintained lawn and flower beds that someone clearly cared for. And as they stepped inside, Ethan was struck by the strange contradiction he felt there. The house was lovely, with comfortable furniture and tasteful decorations and family photos on the walls. But despite all its physical beauty, there was an unmistakable emptiness to it, a silence that felt heavy and sad, as if the house itself was lonely. "Do you live here alone?" Ethan asked, his young voice echoing slightly in the quiet living room. Michael paused, his hand resting on the back of a chair, and when he spoke, his voice carried years of grief. "Yes, I do. My wife, Rebecca, passed away 3 years ago from cancer. We tried for years to have children, went through fertility treatments, considered adoption at one point, but it just never happened for us. After she died, this house became just a place where I sleep between shifts at the hospital. It's beautiful, but it's empty, and I've been empty too." Ethan, with the emotional intelligence that suffering often brings, looked at Michael with understanding beyond his years. "Do you ever feel like she's still watching over you?" he asked softly. Michael was startled by the question, touched by its depth and sincerity, and he found himself nodding slowly. "Sometimes I do feel that," he admitted. "Sometimes I think she's still here, guiding me somehow, showing me the way forward." Over the following days and weeks, something remarkable began to develop between Michael and Ethan, a connection that neither of them had anticipated, but both desperately needed. Michael found himself thinking about this boy constantly, feeling a pull toward him that he couldn't quite explain. And one night, he had a dream so vivid it felt more real than waking life. In the dream, Rebecca appeared to him exactly as she had looked on their wedding day, radiant and smiling, and she spoke to him with the clarity he remembered so well. "Michael," she said, "this boy needs you, but more than that, you need him too. Let him into your life. Let him into your heart. This didn't happen by accident. Give him the love we never got to give our own children." Michael woke up with tears on his face and absolute certainty in his heart about what he needed to do. The next morning, Michael told Ethan to get ready because they were going somewhere special, and he drove them to Pennsylvania Hospital where he worked as a cardiologist. As they walked through the bustling corridors filled with doctors in white coats, nurses moving efficiently between rooms, and patients being wheeled on gurneys, Ethan was completely mesmerized by the organized chaos of it all, by the sense of purpose that seemed to emanate from every person they passed. "What do you do here?" Ethan asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. "I'm a doctor," Michael explained with quiet pride. "I help fix people's hearts when they're broken, and sometimes we save lives here. Every single day, people come through these doors, facing their darkest moments, and we do everything in our power to give them another chance at life." Ethan looked around at the doctors, nurses, and medical students rushing past, and something stirred deep inside him, something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope, purpose, the sense that maybe there was something more to life than just surviving from one day to the next. "The people here seem so important," he said quietly. "They're doing something that really matters, something that changes people's lives." Michael smiled and put a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Maybe one day you could do something like this too, Ethan. Maybe you could be the one changing lives, helping people, making a difference in this world." And in that moment, standing in that hospital corridor, a seed was planted in Ethan's young heart, a seed that would grow into something beautiful. But life, as it always does, became more complicated when Michael began the legal process of adopting Ethan. The system required that they locate Ethan's biological mother to either get her consent or legally terminate her parental rights. And so Michael found himself with no choice but to contact Sophia Martinez, the woman who had sold her son for gambling money 7 years earlier. When Sophia appeared at the hospital the following week, Ethan felt his entire body tense with a mixture of emotions he couldn't fully process. Anger, hurt, betrayal, and somewhere buried deep beneath all of that, a tiny flicker of something that might have been longing for the mother he had never really known. Sophia looked older than her 40 years, worn down by hard living and poor choices. And when she saw Ethan, she tried to smile, but it came out wrong, forced and uncomfortable. "Baby," she said, her voice shaking, "I've been waiting for this day. I never thought I'd see you again. I want to make things right. I want to be your mother again." Ethan felt rage surge through him, hot and overwhelming, and he jerked away from her attempted embrace. "Waiting?" he said, his young voice sharp with pain. "You sold me like I was nothing. Like I was just a piece of property you could trade for money to feed your addiction. You didn't care about me then, so why should I believe you care now?" Sophia's eyes filled with tears, and Michael could see that at least some of her emotion was genuine, that she did carry regret for what she had done. But he also knew that regret alone wasn't enough to undo the damage she had caused. "I made terrible mistakes," Sophia said, her voice breaking. "I was desperate and scared, and I made the worst choice of my life. But I'm different now. I'm clean, I'm working, and I want a chance to be the mother I should have been all along." Michael stepped forward then, his voice firm and protective. "Sophia, you made your choice years ago when you abandoned your son. Now he's finally found stability, found hope for a real future. And I won't let you disrupt that just because you suddenly feel guilty about the past." Ethan looked between them, his heart pounding. And then he turned to face his mother directly. When he spoke, his voice was steady despite the tears streaming down his face. "I forgive you," he said quietly, "because holding on to this anger is only hurting me, and I don't want to carry it anymore. But forgiving you doesn't mean I want you back in my life. I have everything I need now. I have someone who chose me, who wants me, who sees value in me. I don't need you anymore." Sophia sobbed openly, reaching toward him one last time. But Ethan stepped back, and she understood that this was goodbye. She looked at her son one final time, nodded slowly through her tears, and walked away, leaving Ethan to the future he deserved. After she left, Michael pulled Ethan into a tight embrace, feeling the boy's thin frame shake with quiet sobs against his chest. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever known," Michael whispered into his hair. "You know exactly what you need and what's right for you, and that's an incredible gift." That night, Michael sat alone in his room and spoke to the photograph of Rebecca on his nightstand. "You were right, my love," he said softly. "This boy needed me, and I needed him more than I ever could have imagined. Thank you for showing me the way." Several months later, the adoption was finalized, and Ethan officially became Ethan Hayes, the son that Michael and Rebecca had always dreamed of having. The name change was more than just paperwork. It was a symbol of rebirth, of a new identity built on love and choice, rather than accident and abandonment. Together, they created a life filled with routine and warmth, with family dinners and homework help, with basketball games in the driveway, and quiet evenings reading together in the living room. Ethan thrived in school, his natural intelligence finally given the support and encouragement it needed to flourish, and he began talking seriously about following in Michael's footsteps, about becoming a doctor himself one day, and helping people the way Michael helped his patients. The shadow of Sophia faded completely from Ethan's life, not through forced forgetting, but through the natural process of building something better, something stronger. Michael had kept his unspoken promise to Rebecca, giving this boy the love, respect, and family he had always deserved. And in return, Ethan had given Michael a reason to live again, a purpose beyond just going through the motions of existence. They discovered new possibilities in each other, healing wounds neither of them thought would ever close, and proving that sometimes family isn't about blood at all, but about the people who choose to stand by you, who see your worth even when you can't see it yourself, who believe in you even when the whole world has given up. Years passed, and Ethan excelled in high school, eventually earning a full scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania, where he pursued pre-medicine with passionate determination. Michael attended every important moment: graduation ceremonies, award presentations, the day Ethan received his acceptance to medical school, and each time he felt Rebecca's presence there too, felt her joy and pride radiating through him. The homeless boy who had once wandered Philadelphia's streets barefoot was now on his way to becoming Dr. Ethan Hayes, and it all began with one simple choice, one moment of honesty, when dishonesty would have been so much easier. So what's the lesson here, friends? This story shows us that integrity, even in our darkest moments, has the power to transform our lives in ways we cannot possibly imagine. Ethan could have taken that wallet and disappeared, and no one would have blamed a hungry, desperate child for making that choice. But he honored the values his Uncle Richard had instilled in him, and that single act of honesty opened a door to a completely different future. It brought him a father, a home, an education, and a purpose that changed not just his own life, but the lives of countless patients he would go on to help. Michael, too, was transformed by his choice to see beyond the surface, to recognize potential in a broken child, and to open his heart again despite the pain of his past. Sometimes the people we're meant to save end up saving us instead. Sometimes the most profound healing comes not from receiving love, but from giving it freely to someone who desperately needs it. If this story touched your heart, moved you, or reminded you that goodness still exists in this world, please hit that subscribe button and join our community where we share powerful, life-changing stories like this one every single week. Drop a comment below telling us what this story meant to you. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. And remember, one act of integrity, one choice to do the right thing, even when it costs you something, can change absolutely everything. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.